Hi, and welcome to the Under the Bad Moon podcast. Today, we will be talking about Soulblight Gravelords and just kind of my experience with them and where I started, where I am now, and yeah, we're just kind of going to go through it and just talk about the evolution. I'm joined today with Austin,
Hey, how you doing?
as always.
Yes.
All right, so Soulblight Graveyards is a fairly new book for Age of Sigmar. I think it was the last in 2.0, but based on kind of how the points break down and everything, it does really feel like this book was written for 3.0 because they didn't make any real point changes to it going into the new edition. Which interesting, that kind of plays into kind of some of my evolution because I went from one unit to other units, and now I'm kind of going back to some other units, and
Yeah.
we'll dig into that. So the first thing I want to talk about is battle line. So um, there's a couple different options for your battle line, right? So you have your standard, which is zombies, dire wolves, and your death rattle skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to call them skeletons. So we're just
Yeah.
going to go from there. You can make Graveguard battle line if you have a White King as your general. If you are playing Legion of Night, Vargeist can be battle line. Legion of Blood, you get Black Knights, and if you're playing Castelli, I don't know, Blood Knights become battle line.
Oh, those are pretty cool.
And then if you're playing Avangori, you can make the Terrorgeist and the Zombie Dragons and stuff battle line, which is really cool.
Jeez.
And there's a lot in here, and based on which like vampire bloodline you pick, there's a lot of really good builds. I started off looking at Legion of Night. I really like
Mm-hmm.
Manfred. I think Manfred's really good. And that's kind of what back in the day I used to be a big Vampire Counts player, and I used to love Manfred and just the Karstein
Yeah.
family in general. So immediately when this book came out, I was excited to see the emphasis on the vampires on this instead of the old legions in Nagash, which I wasn't a huge fan of. I know
Mm-hmm.
people will say, well, it's very much the same thing and all the same units. Yeah, but it was a lot different in my opinion.
So now the bloodlines and stuff that you talk about, these are like this is where you get your unique command traits and artifacts, right? Is that like do each of them have a list of unique things, or is it like an overarching trait?
Um, so they have the bloodlines give you whatever your like faction attributes are, and then you have a list of warlord traits and I'm sorry, they're called command traits and
Okay,
artifacts of power.
I see. Okay.
So depending on which one you pick. Now, what's cool about this book is even if you're taking like a named Avangori character, you can still include it in your Virkos dynasty, right?
Hmm.
Nothing stops you from doing that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
All
Because
right. Cool.
all right, so I started off with Legion of Night. I really liked Manfred. I thought he was cool, and I had some Vargeist, and I think I was also trying to run the Fellwing flock back when battalions
Mm-hmm.
were a thing. So I was kind of trying to merge all this stuff together, and I really like the idea of the Ageless Cunning. And so between like deep striking the Vargeist and using the Ageless Cunning, plus putting stuff in the graveyard, I could basically only deploy a minimal amount of units, and then just kind of bring stuff in, as deep striking down or coming on
Yeah,
from the edges or coming up to the graveyards. And I really like that.
that's
Um,
very cool. I mean, if you think about just the way that that looks on the board,
yeah.
that's very cool.
And then the bait is their other trait, and it gives you a +1 to your save rolls when you target like Death Rattle or Death Walker. And I was like, okay, that's
Hmm.
pretty cool too. It's only in the first turn, so usually what that meant was like I'd bring up a bunch of zombies or a bunch of skeletons like in the middle of the board because
Mm-hmm.
I had so many deployments that I would always go first, and I kind of built my army to do that.
Yeah.
So I'd bring them up in the center of the board, and then they would charge me and hit me, but I got the +1, and it was a
Right.
whole thing. Um, but I kind of found I don't necessarily like um, bringing stuff up from the graveyard because it happens at the end of my movement phase. But what I've
Right.
noticed slowly was I actually need to have that stuff on the board to cast the spells, like the Van Hill's Dance and Macabre, because it
Mm,
happens in the hero phase. All the stuff that kind of buffs these guys up all happens in the hero phase, and they weren't around. So then what I found was happening is I had all these wizards on the table who couldn't really cast anything because there was really nothing to cast on. And I was like, okay, so
yeah, yeah.
that was my first revelation. My second revelation was I started off with like the big zombie hordes that like because everybody was saying like, oh, zombies, 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 zombies,
Yeah.
and I looked at them, and I'll be honest, I was really hesitant, and I
Uh-huh.
didn't necessarily like them. And I played a couple of games with them, and I overextended the first game. So whatever, I take that as a loss because they're way out of position. Um, my second game with my zombies, they actually did fairly well. They're pretty survivable, but they definitely need a hero to hang out with them and make sure that they work properly.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of weaknesses. Like they die, even if you have like 60 of them, they die super fast. I mean, these guys, they have no real armor to speak of.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the bait gives you the +1. If
Mm-hmm.
you have a cart around, that can give them a +1. So initially, like I was kind of trying to do tricks like that to give them like a pretty good armor save, a 5 up at least in the
Right.
first turn, so they can kind of take some hits. But what I found was that these guys just I mean, they're zombies, so they just die. And like
Sure.
while they have like the claws, and you can give them the extra attacks, and you can spend all these synergies to buff them up to do a bunch of attacks. And on sixes, they do mortal wounds, and then on a 2+, they add another zombie to the unit, and that can go above the starting limit according to the FAQ. So like
Right, right.
I'm like, okay, so I can invest a lot into these zombies, and they're kind of a horde, and they hit stuff, and they hurt, and there's a lot of bodies, and that's really good. Um, but honestly, at the end of the day, like I would do all that and do all the buffs, and maybe my rolling just sucks, but like I'd only get like 5 or 6 mortal wounds, maybe. So I'd only really maybe get like a couple zombies back.
Mm.
Um, at the end of the combat with them. And honestly, like it really wasn't hard for my opponent to hit them with like a hammer unit and just kill like 20, 30 zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when they do that, like I'm talking about after they kill like like whatever X amount, then I'm also, unless I have another character there who also has to spend a command point to also make them
Jeez.
ignore battle shock, you would lose a bunch more.
Yeah.
Now, and this is why I say like the first game I overextended because I was way out of range. I wasn't able to do that, and they just disappeared. They were deleted. Um,
Well, okay, so hold on with the zombie stuff here. Just to rehash, you said that when you make rolls for mortal wounds when you lose them or when they attack, when they
all right,
die,
so
right?
when they attack on a 6, they cause mortal
Okay,
wounds
I
straight up.
got you.
Um, every time they kill a model, now granted they hit on fives and wound on fives, so every time they kill a model, on a 2+, you can add a zombie to the unit. So
I
basically,
see.
they
Okay.
turn them into a zombie. So they
Yep.
kill a model, turn into a zombie. Now,
Hmm.
that's really great when you're fighting like 1 wound models, but most people's armies have like 2 to 3 wound models.
Yep.
So, yes, there are the
Ugh.
1 wound models, but a lot of times you're not fighting those. So, you're not really bringing enough zombies back, and you're usually losing a bunch to attrition. Moral
Yeah,
of the
the
story
numbers
is
don't check
they
out.
disappear. They disappear pretty quick. Now,
Yeah.
with the new FAQ, um, the fact that now you roll to bring them back every battle shock phase is actually really good. So now I might go back and check out the zombies again because if I lose 40 of them and I can get 20 back in mid game, that's actually pretty good. But my general consensus here on zombies are I think they're trash. Um,
Yeah, they don't
I
sound
think
great.
they're pretty good if you just want to like put 20 of them in the backfield with your necromancer, because then your necromancer can pawn off wounds to him, but he can do that to death rattle too. So we're going to
Okay.
move into phase 2 of my thing. Also, okay, so in phase 1 too, I had a bunch
Okay.
of death rattle skeletons too that I was testing out.
Uh-huh.
And while they were okay, they were kind of getting. I was playing a lot against stuff that had a -1 to hit too, so I was hitting on 4s usually and wounding on 4s. And when Manfred came in, sure it was good. but I was struggling pretty hard with my skeletons too. And I found that dire wolves actually were really strong.
Hmm.
Um, they had 2 wounds apiece. For basically, you get 20 wounds for like 135 points, which is I think a little bit more than the zombies. But these things hit on 4s and 4s. Uh, I think they have a -1 rend built into them. Let me double check that. But the real thing is when they charge, they get +1 to hit, +1 to wound. So they 3s and
That's
3s.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's really good.
so I started really looking at these guys, and they move 10 inches, so they're really fast. You don't
Yep.
have to worry about putting them in the graveyard because you can just bring them up. You can cast your spells on them. They're Deathwalker, so I believe you can Van Hale's Dance and Macabre them, so they can attack twice on the charge. They have
Jeez.
2 attacks apiece, so like overall that's like 4 attacks. And
Surprising that their battle line.
man, they're
Maybe
really
it's
good.
not, but it is to me. It seems like it would be surprising their battle line.
Well, um, yeah, here they are. No, they do not have a -1 rend, but that's okay.
Okay,
So
sure.
on the charge, they have 2 attacks. Like I said, they're going to hit on 3s and 3s. So they got like the built-in, +1/+1 to wound and
Mm-hmm.
damage. So you don't need to spend all out attack or anything on them. I think your
Exactly.
vampires can then feel free to give an additional attack with their ability. So now they're at 3 attacks. Um, I mean,
Oh yeah.
and they're Deathwalker, so they get all the benefits of Deathwalker stuff that's out there. I believe they're also summonable, so you can bring them back.
And what's the deal with the like the sergeant, the leader in the group? They can
Yeah,
issue
they
commands,
can
right?
issue commands. Yeah, so
Yeah.
they have one, which is also
Yep.
good, is the Doom Wolf. So then I was all on the Dire Wolf
That's
train.
so good.
So as I was looking at the Dire Wolves, then I thought to myself, okay, well, what else can I do here? Um, and I started kind of looking around at this point, I started kind of looking around at some of the other bloodlines, and I was like, well, if I'm running a bunch of Dire Wolves, why not look at the werewolf vampires? So I started looking at Virkos,
Okay.
and
Naturally.
um, it's interesting because Virkos has their. So first off, I was not happy with my spell casting. Even with Manfred casting his 2 spells and my Necromancer, I kept failing Van Hale's Dance, or even if I'd fail it, like I'd get dispelled, and just
Uh-huh.
like nothing was really playing out for me. And I didn't like the fact that like when the vampires cast vampire magic, or I think when necromancers cast their necromancy magic, if they roll a natural 9 or higher,
Okay.
then you basically get to double cast. You get to cast the spell
Oh
twice.
my god, that's so cool.
It is cool, but it's not their like war scroll, so you can't like dance macabre 2 things. But I
Okay.
never got that, so I'm like, this rule's stinking lame. Like
And you can't cast the same spell, right? Isn't
you
that
can't cast the same
that's
spell.
now
Well,
a
you can. I
thing?
mean, if it double casts, it goes off, right? Because it's kind of built into the rule.
Okay.
But
Hmm.
it basically it never triggers, right? Because like
Yeah, I mean same with
very
mine.
rarely, and when you roll the 9, it's usually not. It's on like your Mystic Shield or something. You're just
Yeah.
like, well, I don't double cast that, so whatever. Well,
Okay. Okay.
Viracos, so I started looking at that, and they can reroll casting rolls for friendly vampire wizards. Now, anybody who plays Soulblight knows that the vampire spells, they're not the greatest. They're kind of lame. They're not very strong. Um, so you know what is actually great about that is even if I successfully cast it and I don't get a 9, I don't care. I'll re-roll it because I'm really not missing out on too much.
Yeah.
But when I get 2 uh, Amaranthian orbs off, all of a sudden that's actually really good.
And what's that do again?
So you draw a line within 9 inches. You like basically
Okay.
you pick a point on the battlefield within 9 inches, and you draw a line, and then any unit hit by that line on a 2+ suffer D3 mortal wounds, except for
Yeah.
death units.
I like that. That's good.
So what I find is doing 2d3 mortal wounds to like 2 or 3 different units of my
Oh
opponent,
yeah.
super super strong.
And that
Also,
hits characters too. Like if
oh, it
you
hits everything.
oh, because usually like in 40K they do that stupid thing where if you're trying to do something to a character like
Yeah,
that,
no,
you subtract.
yeah, it hits
That's
everything on a two
good.
plus. Yeah, it's really good.
Okay.
Soul Spike is the other one that I like. Basically, you can or Soul Pike. You put it on a unit, and if they charge you, whatever the result of their charges, so if they roll 2d6 and they roll like a
hmm
7,
hmm
you pick up 7 dice. You roll them on a 4+. The unit suffers a mortal wound.
Ooh, I dig that a
Yeah.
lot.
So that one's really good too.
That's really cool.
And then when you combine that, if you double cast that one, right now you're putting on 2 units who are going to come in. Now this all kind of comes into play
Huh.
because I've kind of quit putting my stuff in the graveyard. And what I do instead is I slowly march forward with all these
Yeah.
buffs in place so that I basically want my opponent to come charge me. So this is where the soul pike comes into play.
Hmm.
So anyway, so double casting is actually really good. It kind of makes your spells worthwhile. Even if the generic, just single casting is not great. So, if you don't get it, you don't care. But if you can re-roll into the double cast, it's great. The next thing, though, that they do is they add
Hmm.
1 to wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons, a friendly Virkos Dynasty Death Rattle, or Dead Walker units while they are within 9 inches of a friendly vampire hero. Okay,
Wow.
so here my next iteration. So around this point where I'm playing with this is when the new edition rules start leaking,
Uh
and
huh.
like we get a hold of the rules, we start learning that we can't really stack the
You can't
damage
buff
and
up a
every.
unit and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that.
I
Yeah.
mean, I can do +2 to wound, but there's not too much -1 to wound stuff out there. So
Yeah.
really, this kind of lackluster.
And wasn't
And
wasn't wasn't it a change too, where you can only affect them with one spell or command ability? Wasn't
this
that
is
like a
this is
change in
not
3.0?
this is just this is
Oh,
yeah,
this is
that is
just
a
like
thing, but this
passive.
is just the
Okay.
passive. Yeah.
Sorry.
So
Hmm.
at this point, and also we learned about the heroes or the unit champions can issue orders, which again
Yep.
kind of makes me go, well, maybe zombies aren't the right take here. But I started
Yeah.
looking at skeletons again. Um, and
I like them.
I have fallen in love with skeletons, and the reason that I like them over the dire wolves is because with the direwolf coherency rules, I now have to I, it used to be you could spread them out. So you'd have like this
Right.
big long line of 10 wolves. They'd all charge in. You'd have a ton of wounds, but they only have 1 inch reach. So
Yep.
I think this is why they were pointed so low in comparison,
Hmm.
because now that you have to keep them in coherency, it's hard to bring the whole unit to bear. So the 2 attacks make sense because you're kind of
Yeah.
really not getting that back rank for the most part. And I feel like the coherency rules really kind of diminish what I was doing with my wolves. Now, yeah, there's ways to spread it out and stuff, but you're not really going to convince me that they're still good. They still kind of do what they do, but I still take 1 unit of them, and I really only take 1 unit of
Hmm.
them to surround Belladama so that she can shrug off wounds to the dire wolves because that's what she does.
Okay.
So now I got Belladama,
Okay.
and she's key in here because first off, I have 2 units of 20 skeletons, and then I have 2 vampire lords. And the reason I have 2 vampire lords is because I always want to make sure that there's a vampire lord babysitting the unit of skeletons, right?
Okay.
Because they have to be within 9 inches and to give them the +1 to wound. Because skeletons' base stats are they hit on threes, they wound on fours, right? With the vampire hanging
Yes.
out with them, they hit on threes and wound on threes, which is
Yeah.
automatically way better.
That's
That's like
so good,
all of
dude.
your elite troops hit on threes, wound on threes, and now my skeletons are doing it. So I basically keep a vampire lord like directly in the center. And what's cool about it is they fly. So whenever I move the
Okay.
skeletons, I just move the skeletons forward and leave a little pocket for him, and then I just fly him through the unit because he can.
Yes. I love it. Oh, can I just say real quick the skeleton kit? So I was looking up the kit online.
Uh huh.
You get 20 models in a box for whatever the $50
Right.
price tag is,
It's a good.
and they are
It's good.
sick models.
They're so good. Yeah.
20 models.
Yeah.
We don't ever see 20 models in a box.
It's strange too because you buy them in
Jeez.
sets of 10. So this is really almost a unit plus a reinforcement in that
Dang.
box.
Yeah,
It's
right,
actually
yeah.
it's a good buy because you can buy it and it's basically 2 battle line for 2 units of 10. And don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
10 skeletons have their uses, and I can talk about that here in a little bit. But I like to start them off at 20 because it gives them a
Hmm.
little more of the durability because you're going to need that durability when you're rolling to get them back up.
So are the are the this may be an old thing. And I was also looking at like there's an old start collecting box that has
Hmm.
skeletons, but they look different. They look like
Those are the old ones.
so that was an old kit.
Yeah,
Okay,
that
cool.
that was
Yeah,
the
but
old
this new
vampire. Yeah.
box, man, outstanding. So,
Yeah, they
all
look.
right,
I mean, I really like the old skeletons too because they're just
yeah.
basic skeletons. But these ones with their armor and their cloaks and
Oh
everything,
yeah, they're
they
so
just look.
dynamic.
They look good.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Cool.
Not so happy about all the different like when they give them the spears. and this is the same with the
Okay.
Cruel Boys, but it's like they're all holding them in these dynamic, like not regimented way, right? Like each one is individual, but then
Yeah.
it makes like moving them around. Like I'm constantly in fear that I just broke a spear tip off because like I'll hear like the plastic click and I'll just be like, oh man. But anyway, so let's get back. So I started looking into the skeletons and I really like, I start with 20 skeletons. They have a vampire that's like a caddy. The vampires, I like to give the soul spike or the amaranthian orb, or sometimes if I'm feeling good, I'll actually spend my extra bonus so that each of my vampires has soul spike and amaranthian orb. So I can, depending on the situation, I can just do whatever I need to do at that point in time. Um, so their command ability gives +1 attack, which is really useful for the unit that gets Van Hale's danced. And that's important because I believe +1 attack, the math works out better than the +1 to hit,
Yeah,
especially
I
when you're
think.
attacking twice.
Yeah, I would think definitely. And I mean,
And then and then
yeah.
especially when you stack on Belladama's under the killing moon spell, which gives you exploding sixes.
Oh shit.
So
Yeah.
now you have basically what turns out to be about 4 attacks per skeleton because
Yep.
of Van Hill's dance, with exploding sixes that hit on threes, wound on threes. There's no
Jeez.
rend, it's only 1 damage, but this unit is basically there to just mass push attacks and wounds on you, like force you to take saves. And some of the
Yeah.
conclusions that I've made so far is -1 rend is good but not great because people can just all out defense to kind of ignore that. -2 rend starts getting you to where you're actually making a difference to their armor.
Mm-hmm.
-3 rend is great. But if you don't have -2 rend, then
Mm-hmm.
having 0 rend kind of sometimes I feel is just almost as good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because then your opponent may or may not use all out defense on them because maybe they're trying to use it against like my blood knights or something
Right.
else, right? They're saving it. So
Hmm.
the the no rend isn't as detrimental, I don't think, especially when you can just force a bunch of die rolls. And what these skeletons do is they force your opponent to make a bunch of saves. And since there's really no rerolls anymore, you're gonna get some of those through. And what I
Yeah.
found was each time like the 20 skeletons attack, they usually do somewhere between like 10 and 13 wounds. So my opponent's having to make 10 or 13. And then when they're danced,
That's
double that,
good.
right?
Yeah, that's good.
So these guys actually hit like a truck. Now I've spent all the points to like make them all out attacks. So when they get
Right.
hit, they're not going to be able to defend as much. They have a 5-up base save,
Yep.
but hopefully I stand a bunch of them up because I should get half of the whatever they killed back up.
Yeah.
Now I take Pack Alpha on my Warlock, who's usually hanging out because he's the one that's Van Hill's dancing them, and I basically just save that Pack Alpha because basically you get this general can use a command ability without a command point being spent once per turn,
Mm-hmm.
and I save that specifically for my Battle Shock. So
Yeah,
that
that's
I
good.
can ignore battle shock on my skeletons. Now, if obviously if it's kind of going through the phases and that's not going to be a thing that happens, then I don't care.
Yeah. So
Now
these guys, you have to wipe these guys out pretty
you have to wipe
much.
these guys out, but right. I have remember when I said I have 2 vampires, right?
Yep.
I
Yep.
usually have a Vangorian Lord and Belladama,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have the Necromancer, and I
Yep.
give the Necromancer the Arcane Tome so he can cast 2 spells because I mean the necromancy spells are the best, and you always want to be casting Van Hale's Dance. So with the book, he can now also cast his other spell, which is usually like
Oh,
-1 attack to hero or like to a hero, or
okay.
I think -1 to hit. Either way, he's really strong. But I have all these casters. So in my hero phase, you get to heal the skeletons D3 for free, and then you can cast a spell on them that gives you 3 more.
Yeah.
And if they're not in combat, you can spend the command point to try to rally them. And obviously, you'd want to rally before you start healing.
Yep.
So, like, and even if they finally do go down, I usually have a second unit of skeletons that are ready to just take the place and use the Van Hell's Dance on them.
Yeah.
And once they do finally
Dang.
die, which to be honest is very rarely that I've found, I can actually just bring them back to the grave pretty easily now that I'm rolling every turn, and just dropping 10 skeletons like on the other side of the board on someone else's objective is really good.
So wait, so if they wipe the whole unit, they they get do they still get to come back?
Yeah. Yeah, on a 5+, if I roll a 5+, I can bring a unit back that's been killed. So I can bring 10 back.
Holy.
So after they finally get through them, I just basically spit them back out. And
Oh, that's
then
so good.
usually I have Belladama back there with her wolves, so that if they do kill the skeletons, then my wolves are right there, and now they got
Right.
to deal with the wolves.
I like this idea of nesting these characters within each of these like smaller units, and it makes them end up that they're like more than the sum of their parts. You know,
Hmm.
it's pretty cool because that's a pretty big enhancement to attach to each unit of skeletons, right? A dedicated hero. You're basically making the unit like what 50% more expensive or something if you think
Kind of.
about it.
Yeah, it's almost doubling the points, really. But
Yeah.
the vampire itself, the one on foot, he's not great. But I usually kind of bubble wrap him with the skeletons, especially if I'm
Hmm.
going to engage him in the combat with it too. So my opponent can only put so many attacks on him, and in return, as long as he kills one thing, he can heal D3, which
Yeah.
usually means that he usually ends up healing whatever damage is done to him anyway. Now, if someone has like a big monster or something,
Yeah.
I definitely want to keep him more towards the back so he's not
Hmm.
getting hit. Because if someone can take a monster and hit your vampire lord, they'll just kill it.
Right. But what's
Um,
interesting about having that caster nearby, you said that they kind of dunk on other heroes, is like I could, now I don't know, right? Because I'm not really playing this game right now, but I could imagine a popular strategy is to take like some badass hero and throw them into what looks like a chaff unit to
mhm,
just try to mulch it and like
yeah.
totally shift momentum. They're in for a pretty rude surprise if they try that against these.
Yeah, and you know what? It depends on what I'm doing too. Because if you take that hero that's going to blender up my chap unit, right?
Yeah.
Chances are, at that point, I usually have arcane shield on them, and that's where
Hmm.
I get my 4+ save.
Sure.
Um, if you're throwing something in it that could be real deadly, like let's say you bring a giant into them, I know I'm
Sure.
not going to kill your giant. But what I can do is all out defense from that turn to completely ignore your rend. And now I'm just having a 5+ save with a 6 up ignore. And it's going to take a long time for that giant to chew through those skeletons, especially if I'm Van Hale's dancing and I'm rolling to get back up twice a turn.
Ugh.
Like they're not going away anytime soon. Now,
Yeah, that's
talking
cool.
about rolling Van Hale's dance to get back up.
Okay.
So it's complicated because if you kill 5 skeletons and then I go and I bring 5 skeletons back, when I activate again, it says roll a d6 for every slain model. Now,
Hmm.
so this needs to be FAQ'd or it'd be very clearly documented because if I activate them a second time, do I get to roll again? Do I roll for all 5? Do I roll for however many are still dead? It
Sure.
says in the bravery check, I think it's like for the purposes of bravery tests, any models, even if a unit was returned, it still counts as being slain. So I personally
Right.
have been trying to take that as only for the purposes of battle shock, if that makes sense.
Right. I agree. I don't. Yes, I agree. Like if you lost five and you rolled perfect and you got five back, and then you if we interpreted it the first way, you rolled again and you got five more, you'd be up twice what you lost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's tough.
let me pull the rule book up here real quick.
I think it does make sense for Battle Shock. Absolutely. I think like we can definitely agree on that, saying
I
that
mean,
if you lose
I'm
five
not
and
a fan
five
of
got
that.
up,
I,
yeah,
I
I
feel
don't
like that's
know.
a leftover rule from back when like the only way you could kill a skeleton horde was through battle shock because of the way their resin worked. Because if you didn't kill like if you had like 40 skeletons and you killed
Yeah,
30 of them, it wasn't uncommon for them to just in their or for them to just bring a bunch of them back.
yeah.
So like the only way you could really kill them was through the
Mm.
battle shock. And now that's not really the case anymore. So I just feel like it's not needed. I feel like if a unit comes back, it should just be back. I think that's how 40K treats it, and it works totally fine. But
Yeah, it's muddied because of the second part though. Like wondering whether or not you can roll in their turn for models you lost and brought back in your turn.
uh,
It sounds like it should just
well, the
say
skeleton thing is only in that combat phase. If that makes sense. So
okay.
in the combat phase, if I basically I want you to attack my skeletons before I go, because
Yeah,
when I activate
then
them
you can
to
roll.
attack, I can roll for every model slain that in that turn.
I see.
So it's not if you kill them in the shooting phase, I'm boned. Boned. Um, there's nothing I can do about it. So basically, like I need you to attack my skeletons, and then in return, I'll activate them and stand them back up. If
I
that makes
see,
sense.
yeah. The Skeleton Legion rule. When you pick this unit to fight, roll a dice for each model in this unit that was slain in that phase. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I understand.
Um,
Hmm.
just give me 1 second. I'm just pulling up the bravery because it's very specifically they call it out,
That's fine.
and of course I'm having trouble finding it. Nope, terrain.
I mean, they're undoubtedly good.
Yeah, here it is. So it says if a slain model is returned to a unit in the same turn that it is slain, it still counts as having been slain in that battle round for the purposes of the battle shock test. So the way I interpret this
Okay.
is for the purposes of battle shock test, it still counts as being slain. But if
Yes.
you are bringing it back and it was slain, you don't get to roll again because it's already back. That's my interpretation.
That's probably fair. Yeah, that's probably the most
But
fair, reasonable way
that being
to look at
said,
it.
if you kill 10 of them, right, and I get 5 back, I can then activate again and I can roll 5 dice because I still have 5 slain models
Yes.
and roll for those 5, which ends up being like you pretty much get, you know, almost all of them back.
Yeah.
And then I pop my pack alpha to ignore their bravery, so I don't even care about the battle shock.
Yep.
And then in my turn, hopefully it comes into my turn because, like I said before, I usually
Then
let
you.
them charge me.
Mm-hmm.
I heal D3 of them back, and then if I don't get it back to full strength at that point, I'll cast the spell to bring 3 more back. So basically, I'm back to 20.
Oh my
So I kind of just, I honestly, I haven't played a game where I've lost this unit yet, honestly. And I've even got to the point where I'm thinking about maybe just making it 30 and then
I was
getting
gonna
rid of the
ask it.
second one.
Yeah.
And then instead, and that maybe just making that second squad just like 20 zombies to just do something else. So I've been playing around with that. So that's kind of where I'm at right
Man.
now. I love this unit. It's fantastic. Skeletons are really good when they have the support that they need. Again, Belladama's under the Killing Moon makes them super good.
Hmm.
Uh, so here's my next thing that I've been playing around with, right? So I'm still staying in Virkos. I'm still keeping what I got. The
Okay.
Vangorian Lord, I might try to swap out now. The Vangorian Lord by himself is a monster. Anybody who's been playing with him knows that he's a monster. He's so good. He's so durable.
What a
You
cool
can you
kit.
can kind of throw him out there on his own and he can do his thing. But that being said, if this guy's around those skeletons too, and now he's giving that -1 armor save aura, and you have arcane shield on your skeletons, having those skeletons with a 4+ save that basically isn't modified is so strong. Um,
Yeah.
so he's just a force multiplier with his armor, his rend reduction aura is really good. But
That's so
one of
cool.
one of the
Jeez.
things I'm
Nightmares
thinking about
miasma. Yeah.
is popping over Manfred into the army. Now he doesn't count as a Virkos vampire, obviously, but
Right.
he doesn't break my allegiance ability. And his command ability that happens in the hero phase still triggers and works. So if I don't know if you remember, but what he does is in my hero phase, I can use his command ability,
Mm-hmm.
and he basically then on himself, and he has an aura +1 to hit, +1 to wound.
Yep.
So now my skeletons will hit on 2s and wound on 3s. And if Manfred kills something, he gives all the units around him +1 attack. I think it's Death Rattle and Deadwalker. So now my skeletons get +1. So in theory, my skeleton blob could have the exploding 6s with 3 attacks now, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, um,
Yeah.
and Van Hill's dance for an extra go. Like the the possibilities are kind of endless. Now you're saying, well, you're putting a lot of work into this one unit. I'm like, yeah, but this is what I found so far is like you really only need to control so much of the board, right?
Uh-huh.
You need to be fighting over the center objective or holding your two and pushing one of theirs. Like
Yep.
there's not a ton of movement that I've found having to do. And usually the outstretched thing is like a Vangorian Lord and my Blood Knights are kind of basically maybe running up a flank trying to hit somebody pretty hard.
Right.
I have vampire bats holding back and doing some board control stuff, or maybe I need my vampire bats to fly up and or fell bats to fly up and like charge stuff so I don't get overwatched, unleash hell. So there's just
Yeah.
a lot of things going on here, and I have my flanks. I feel pretty strongly secured, and basically what I'm talking about is my center core, and I've
Yeah.
been basically trying to build like this anvil slash hammer unit of skeletons that will
That's so
just
cool.
tear things up. And I mean, they're good. And if you haven't tried it yet, give it a go because there's so many ways to buff these guys and synergize them. You could even go Legion of Night, and I think there's it's either a relic or command ability that kind of does if you kill something, you get a +1 to hit, +1 to wound. I think it is. So you get like a mini Manfred.
Jeez.
There's just
He's
a
so
lot
good.
of things that you can do. Personally, I like the Virkus. I like the re-rolling. I like going spell heavy because the best part about going spell heavy is that you save your Van Hell's Dance for the end, and then you just go ahead and throw a bunch of spells at people, and eventually they run out of dispels because when you're casting like like eight or nine spells a turn, your opponent usually has like two or three dispels at most,
Okay,
and
yeah.
they're trying to stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end and you're like, and now Van Hell's Dance. And they're just like, oh,
Oh,
crap.
I should have waited.
Yeah. And then even sometimes they do wait and then you cast it anyway. And if you have your corpse cart with your +1 to cast, which is what I like to use now instead of the -1 to wound one,
Mm,
now my guy's chances are he's going to cast it anyway because he's got a +1. So
jeez.
the averages are in your favor there. So it's just crazy, man. There's a couple things I want to try. Like I think getting a spell portal in there would be a really strong addition to my list.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm,
but that's just kind of, I guess, in a nutshell, my journey through my battle line and what I found and what I really like. And it might just be my love for the skeleton kit and how cool they are and wanting to make them work. I've kind of completely foregone the Graveguard, as cool as they are and as good as they are. They're so expensive and
I was gonna say the
they
shield
die.
guys, right?
Yeah, they die so easy still.
Because we talked about them at one point. They on paper they looked pretty beefy, right? Like they were pretty
Yeah.
defensible, and they had.
Well, their problem is that their shields give them a +1 to their armor save instead of adding +1 to their
Oh,
save
that's right.
characteristic.
That was before the 3.0 stuff.
Right. So that's a
Yeah.
huge negative in my opinion
Damn.
because now you can't really like the best that they're ever going to have is a 4+ save.
Yep. They
And
should have
I
made that
know,
improve their armor trait.
right, I know you can like ignore some rend and stuff and that's fine, but these guys are crazy expensive and
Yeah.
they do a lot of damage, but honestly these skeletons are easier to keep alive. You can get their armor save just as good,
Yeah.
and they come back easier, and they're like half the points.
So the yeah, I got you now. That makes sense. I completely forgot about the shield thing.
And
The Van.
they're not as huge of a target. People see Graveguard and they kill them immediately.
Yep.
People
Bleed
see
your
20
points out.
skeletons and they go, "Oh, it's 20 skeletons. I don't care."
I like that you're using the base like dismissed troop to be the anvil though. That's pretty cool.
They're so good.
I like that.
I mean, man, there's just so much you can do with them too, with all the new
Now
rules.
the so you run the regular lords behind them or whatever, the vampire lords, right? And then the Vangorian lord is the like centaur looking
Yeah,
vampire
he's
kit
like the big
guy.
monster guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And what does he typically do? Does he run out to counter enemy heroes that come smashing in? Does he
You know,
take out monsters?
he
What does he
he
do?
he doesn't he can do damage, but he doesn't do a ton of damage. What he's really good at doing is reducing rend to things he's in combat with.
Yeah.
He's really good. I find I like to use him to bait people. Like I'll bait people like to kind of go after them, and then I'll
Yeah.
use the redeploy to fall back a couple inches and put people out of position. I usually give him the
Okay.
flaming sword spell.
Oh,
Um,
that's cool.
but he also has bloody deluge, which I think gives a +1 to wound, which I don't necessarily need all the time because of what I already do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But if he's out on the flank with my blood knights, bloody deluge is all of a sudden like really useful. He's got a command ability that you can use at the end of a combat. If like a unit kills something, you can pop it, and it's like table wide, and they can heal up, which is really good.
Again, good for those multi-wound knights, right?
Multi wound knights or him himself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
like he's got a 3+ save. You can all out defense or finest hour to get that 2 up. He just by being there, he reduces Ren by 1. So a lot of times he's just a 2 up save. Um,
Huh.
he's got the 6 up ignore because he's a vampire. You could argue that you could spend the points for a 5+ ignore. Personally, I like if I give this guy a relic, there's a cloak, and
Hmm.
it's a very interesting item. Let's see, what is it called?
He's fast. 12-inch move
Yeah,
too.
he's super fast. The cloak of the night prowler. So what this cloak does, it allows the bear to pile in an extra 3 inches when they make a pile in move.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
it's not the good pile in because he can't be in combat within 6 inches.
Oh, okay. Right. Right.
But what it does allow you to do is move 6 inches. And you remember when I was saying he's got that aura of 3 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So what he's really good at doing, in my opinion, is um, basically like teleporting or like it now that you have to end close as you were before to the unit, right?
Yeah.
And he flies, so he can move 6 inches. His base is I think 3 inches. So you basically can like jump over units. It's like just enough movement to like jump over units and stuff. And what it allows you to do, or at least how I use it, is I use it to basically get his 3 inch bubble into very inconvenient positions for my opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So I activate him
I
and
can definitely see that.
I throw him around in combat. So like he's in combat with a big unit, but I might throw him to the other side of the unit to get that hero that also charged in to make him minus 1 armor or -1
A lot
rend.
of a lot of surprising positioning tricks with this army. At least the
Yeah,
way that you set it up. It's very cool.
that's what
Very
I
cool.
like to give him that. So if I take, and again, sometimes I'll take the extra spell enhancement, and
Right.
sometimes I take this. My standard loadout is my necromancer with the tome. I think that's 100%
Mm-hmm.
the right call. You should always take that as your first go. The cloak I think is really strong with the Vangorian Lord. The extra spell gives you flexibility too, though, so I don't necessarily hate that.
Yeah. No,
Plus, you have
that's fair.
so many wizards that taking the extra spell lore is really useful, like really useful.
Right. The I'm if I'm remembering this right, the Belladonna lady that you were talking about, she's the one where you have to kill her as she regains all her wounds, right?
No, that's
Oh, that's somebody else. Okay.
yeah, that's another vampire, and I don't know, she's all
Interesting.
right.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
fair. What was the other guy I was thinking about too? Um,
Radikar the Beast.
Probably yeah, the werewolf guy, kind of
Um,
werewolf.
I uh honestly I take him in games like all games are fun games, but I take him in
Yeah,
games when like I know my opponent's a little newer because he's cool. His command ability is really nice because it's a command ability that affects him, and then basically gives him an aura that gives +1 attack to Soulblight Gravelord units around him. So it basically the reason that's good is because you use that on him, and then you can use like um, all out attack on the unit
yeah,
that's attacking. So they get the +1 attack and all out attack. So that's
yeah.
what's good about that guy.
That's
But
cool.
but really, what Radikar the Beast does, he gives you an extra unit of direwolves, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
You're really paying for it anyway, though. So like, it
Yeah,
doesn't,
he's
in my
expensive.
opinion, it doesn't really matter because the points for those wolves are basically you're paying the points for the wolves in this guy's profile anyway. But then you also have to spend a command point to bring the wolves out.
Mm.
So Personally, I'd rather just have this guy without those points, but whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Um, he hits okay. You know, he's got a 2-inch reach, which is pretty cool. He's got two of those little cool like the vampire dudes on his base, so that's
Mm-hmm.
where you get the 6 attacks, threes minus 1d3. Honestly, though, I don't really. This guy, I mean, when you compare him to like other, the model looks fantastic. He's super cool. I love him to death. But as far as what he brings to your army,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't like him. Like
that's fair.
it sucks because like you're basically being taxed for another unit of direwolves, which arguably is good because you can summon them anywhere around the board with them.
Yeah.
But like they don't count towards your battle line, which means now you got to have like 4 battle line,
Right. See,
right? Like
that's the thing that jumped out at me.
there's so many things. Like it's good, but it's also bad. And I
Yeah.
think there's more bad to it than good. Honestly, like now that you can just run the Redekar the Wolf, like if you really want to run Redekar, like maybe just take him. Like
Just take him.
the Beast is good. Don't get me wrong. It's just there's so many
Yeah.
better options, especially for those points. Like I would take a Vangorian Lord over Redekar all day, every day. Like
Yeah.
maybe if Redekar had a 3+ save, I could make an argument that he's worthwhile.
To put him. Yeah.
But a 4+ save is pretty rough for a hero that has. I mean, that's it.
Well, he passes wounds off, right, to the wolf. Or am I
No,
thinking about somebody else?
that's yeah, it's Belladama.
Yeah. Okay. Hmm.
Um,
That's kind of a
I guess he
bummer.
does auto mortal wounds on 6s, which is fine. I guess in
Mm,
theory he's got 6 attacks, so he should always at least get 1. He's a -1 to hit, so that's kind of cool. Like he's
Yeah.
not bad. It's just
Yeah.
I wouldn't put a whole lot of faith in him.
I mean, it might not just fit with the list. Like maybe there's another list out there somewhere where there are multiple heroes that buff each other's. You know,
I mean,
I don't
again,
know.
his call to the hunt where he charges in and does the thing and gets
Yeah.
+1 attack is actually really good. It's a really good ability. It's really
Yeah.
strong. My problem with it is the way I play is I usually stand there and brace for the charge.
Well, it's
So
where the list is built, right?
I
You want
guess
them to
in the
slam into
following
them.
yeah, in the following turn he could then charge in and do the thing. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
It,
Maybe
it,
he's a counterplay. Yeah.
he's good. It's just that
Hmm.
like for his points, I think I'd rather take anything else.
No, it's fair. I just figured I'd ask about him. It's an interesting analysis. Um,
That being said, I play this guy a lot. And
yeah.
when I say a lot, like he makes it into probably about half of my list recently. And just because I try to gauge my opponents. Um,
Yeah.
and this is a fun model for me and my opponents to play against versus like the Vangorian Lord who like is really not fun for my opponents
He's
because
just a
a 2+
monster.
armor save that you can't really get through who like kills things and heals himself that
Uh,
kind of never dies unless you really devote a lot to him. I mean, I've had entire armies attack him for like 2 rounds of combat, like 2 turns to try to get him down. And
dude, I
then
think that's what he is. He's like you said, he's bait. He is.
he
He's
is. He
oh,
is.
he's
I mean,
such a cool model too.
him and the Blood Knights, and the Blood Knights are really defensive too, especially with him
Mm,
around, giving the ignore one. And those two together, they just they just take so much damage.
and they're
And
fast.
yeah, they are. So
That's
they're the
big.
ones that are like pushing up your flank and you're trying to deal with them. Meanwhile, I'm slowly, well, I say slowly, but even when I'm running my skeletons, they're still moving pretty decently.
Yeah.
So,
Man,
yeah, I mean
that's
that's
good.
I love them so far. I'm really enjoying it. And again, this by no means is the right build or the best build. This is my build. This is my skeleton
Yeah.
build. This is what I like playing. It's got lots of spell casting. It's got lots of just skeletons and blood knights and just real quick, I could do a quick rundown of the actual list. Is it's Belladama, it's a Necromancer, it's 2 Vampire Lords, a Vangorian Lord, 2 units of 20 skeletons, 10 Dire Wolves, 2 units of Blood Knights, a Corpse Cart, 2 units of Vampire or Felbats, and that's it.
Dang, you still have the cart in there too. There's a lot of stuff in that list,
Oh,
surprisingly, for what
there's a
we
ton
just
of
talked
stuff,
about.
ton of stuff in there. But that's because I'm not spending any points on like Graveguard.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
spending any points. Well, I guess I am spending points on Blood Knights, but let's be
But there's no
honest.
Manfred. There's no
200.
Manfred in that
There's no
list.
Manfred. 200 points is a freaking steal for Blood Knights. So, um,
Yeah.
2 units of
See,
them is solid.
Yeah, for sure. I've been sort of peeking in at this stuff here as we go, and like it looks like a lot of your really beater units are right around that 300 point range. That's where like
Mhm.
things start to break out and either be way too expensive or they're just really good. So having those blood knights at under that, I think is strong.
Yeah. So
The
you may notice
Vangorian
that
Lord is
in this
close.
edition, I'm pretty monster light because I only really have the
Yeah,
Vangorian Lord. But you got to remember also that I have a ton of spells that I can cast, and one of the spells that every wizard knows can turn a hero into a
that's
monster.
true. Yeah, I
So
forgot about
I
that.
use that to my ability too because I have so many spells to cast every turn.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, because they're everywhere too, and they're going to be scattered around the board, which is nice too. Well, not you know what I mean, not
Yeah,
scattered, but
they're
like
actually pretty scattered. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I usually have like
it's really cool.
Belladama in kind of the middle because her under the Killing Moon.
Yeah.
Oh boy, it's so
Well, you can
good.
kind of feint either direction then too. Like I imagine that this plays out, and unless there's a very specific mission where there's nothing in the middle, and then like I don't know, two up each side,
Hmm.
then there may be obviously you'll have to make some decisions, but
Well, the split is I usually send the Vangorian Lord on one
yeah,
side and Belladama on the other, and those are
yeah.
basically my two. How I split my two main forces, if that makes sense. So it's like
I don't know what.
Belladama, the cart, the Vampire Lord, the Necromancer, 20
Yeah.
skeletons, and the Dire Wolves. And then it's the other side is usually the two units of Blood Knights, the Vangorian Lord, the other 20 skeletons, and the other Vampire Lord. And that's how I split up into my two like attack teams.
That's cool to hear like the tactics about that too because the plan always things don't always go to plan, like whether it be just the mission you roll or whatever.
Hmm.
So it's neat. I don't know which flank I'd rather go up against. They both sound
Yeah.
horrifying.
And
I
then
think
I
the Vangorian Lord is just terrifying.
the Vangorian and the Blood Knights,
Yeah.
the nice thing about them is they usually have the Fellbats too. So the Fellbats are basically screening for them. So
Yeah, I
you got
could
to
yeah,
deal with the
definitely.
fell bats if you want to get
Ugh,
to the
wasted
things.
effort.
And those blood knights can just like even if you charge the blood knights, they just fall back and charge you back. Like they're so good.
Yeah.
They're so good.
Well, it's a cool list. Thank you for sharing. I'm all new to all this stuff. I don't know, maybe this isn't true, but I feel like there are way more factions or defined sub factions in this game than 40K. So taking it all in is like it's a lot, but it's cool to hear, evolutions of lists, and I like where it's gone.
Yeah, it's
It's been
you know,
neat.
I've yet to I've yet to fight like a Daughters of Cain, um like whatever the Heart Seeker, whatever
Yeah,
no the ones with the snake bows and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah.
I've yet to fight that to see how it holds up to something like that, and I've yet to fight like Lumineth Realm Lords with all their shooting.
What do you think they'd shoot? I mean, what would you
Well,
do? Would you target Belladama first, or do you
the thing
target
is,
the
the way I
lords?
built it was the Belladama and the Necromancer are kind of the two pivotal pieces in the list. You can't really kill them because they should be shrugging enough wounds off to
Yeah,
the units around them.
the wolves with her is great. Yeah,
Hopefully, that's the
yeah.
play.
Wow, I
And
don't
then the
know.
other play is Belladama. The reason I originally brought her is that she's got the Curse of the Lycan spell. So I can turn models in your shooty unit into werewolf or
Oh,
direwolves,
so they
and
have to
then
come fight.
then they're in combat. So when I
Yep,
charge you, you can't shoot me.
yep. Very cool.
Another reason
That's
why
slick.
that spell portal is probably a necessity for my list.
So is that an endless spell you're talking about?
Yeah,
Spell
the
portal?
spell
Okay.
portal is correct.
And I know I'm thinking of the bridge, but what is the spell portal? You shoot through it,
It's
you
the one
basically
that
cast
yeah
through it.
you basically cast it. You put one mirror next to your caster, then the
Yeah,
other mirror on the board, like within 18 inches, and then
that's
when you
cool
cast a
too.
spell, you can cast it as if you're from that other part.
Yeah.
Now, granted,
Damn,
they can
those are
cast
so
spells
cool.
back through it, but
Oh, that's kind of funny.
yeah,
Man, dude, the
you
endless
gotta
spells,
be.
we'll have to do like a whole thing because I've picked out a few that I think look really cool,
Hmm.
but I feel like the way that this works is like you start playing and then you realize like maybe there's an endless spell that shores up a weakness or else like enhances your strategy and then you lean into that cuz there's so many, dude.
Yeah, there's a bunch for sure. But yeah, we can wrap it up here.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Again, if you made it this far, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell the people at your stores, let them know, and leave a comment. And thanks for coming.